Hey everybody, I am super excited about what God is teaching us through the Passion Month. We've been learning all about the passion of Jesus, how passion comes from Jesus, how we go to Jesus in any moment that we feel dried up or empty, and that we're really looking at this example in the Family Road Trip series, how passion is kind of like a fuel in life, that any vehicle or wonder bus, for example, is going to need gasoline. It needs fuel in order to move forward on this incredible road trip, and we can't do it alone. If you eventually run out, you will be stuck on the side of the road, and that passion is kind of like that fuel in us. It pushes us forward. When we're passionate about something, we're really willing to run harder. When we're passionate for something, we feel those emotions. We lean in on that intuition. We have a boldness like never before when we have passion, and Jesus exudes passion for us. We see again and again that when we want passion for life, as we follow Jesus, he will always bring that to us. He shows us our identity and he draws those things out. And I love how the message previously was all about raising the dead. It takes a lot of passion to raise the dead, to look at death and believe for more beyond that. And that Jesus did that. In John 11, he not only loved Lazarus, but he loved the whole family, that he cared for the sisters, that he spoke with great compassion for Mary and Martha, and that he cried with them, he wept with them, and that we get to see him speak with intense emotions and push forward in passion and do something truly life-changing, raising the dead to life. Now, that can sound really exciting, and we can look at a message like that and be like, yeah, I want to have this passion, and we can get fueled in that way, but there may be times when you are full of passion, but we have to then temper it really carefully with patience as well. I don't know if you've ever had a dream in your heart or a goal or a project or whatever, and you're like, I just want to do it now. I just want to get to it now. I want to finish it now. I want the opportunities now. I want to see those things happen now. And when we look to the scriptures, we see this amazing, very candid, just look at the life of Peter. He's a man of boldness. He's a man of passion. He has tons of passion, but then we see how that's compared as well to the life of Jesus. And so when we look in these scriptures, we see such an interesting comparison. You'll see in the episode for Family Road Trip that there was a need for passion, and that they're all headed towards the next pit stop, and they're trying to move forward on this journey, and Rex is just kind of like done. He is passionate about getting to the end goal, but he's not being very patient along the way, and it seems just like every single thing gets in his way. And so it's a really fun and silly episode, lots of relatable road trip moments that we can probably look back to from our own lives, but in those moments he has a hard time being patient. And so it's this interesting comparison between Rex, a man of passion, and a look at Peter. When you look at Mark chapter 13, you see this moment where Jesus speaks out something to Peter that he doesn't really want to hear. It's on the night of the Last Supper. It's the last night that Jesus is here with his best friends. They're all seated around the table. And Jesus shows a lot of passion for all of the guys, but also patience in the midst of that. In Mark chapter 13, Jesus says, "You will all fall away from me and desert me. This will fulfill the prophecy the scripture says." And he says, and he's continuing on, he says, "When after I'm risen, I will go ahead and I will ahead of you to Galilee." Now, Peter hears this as like a warning sign, like, what do you mean? What do you mean we're going to all fall away? I'm not going to fall away. I mean, everything I know comes from you, Jesus. I'm not going to just abandon you. And he totally bucks up to Jesus, which is passionate and very bold, but he's like not listening. As in the midst of his passion, he completely misunderstands his own capacity, and he doesn't look to Jesus for it. And when Jesus says, "You are going to abandon me," he's like, no, I would not. And it says in verse 29, Peter says, if all the rest lose their faith and fall away, I will still be beside you, Jesus. And he kind of makes this vow of sorts that's like, I won't leave you. And I think there was a passionate, genuine heart in that, but that was not the way this night played out. Jesus says, mark my words in verse 30, mark my words, Peter, this very night before the rooster crows twice, a few hours from now, you will utterly deny me and deny that you even know me 3 times. Well, that's kind of like a big deal to hear, and Peter still doesn't listen. And it says that he replied insistently and emphatically, I absolutely will not, under no circumstances will I ever deny you, even if I have to die with you. And all the others repeated the same thing. They were all with Jesus in word and spirit right there in that moment. And then things start to fall apart. So on this night, this last night with Jesus, of course, Jesus is full of passion. He's about to give his whole life on the cross. He's about to walk out the fulfillment of every prophecy and really bring everything into completion that he came on this earth to do. And full of that passion, he still has patience. On that night, one of the disciples, Judas, is about to betray him, and he still had patience. On that night, all the disciples were arguing about who would be the greatest in the kingdom and who gets to sit with you and who is the greatest. Jesus had patience through that moment. No one even honored Jesus at the beginning of this meal, and Jesus honors them. He has patience. He continues to disciple them and teach them. He washes their feet. It's all out of these acts of patience. Peter passionately said he would never deny Jesus, yet he did 3 times. Jesus is so patient. When Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane and the disciples fell asleep, he was patient. And then Jesus is later arrested. He's put on trial. He's beaten. He's lied about. All of these are moments that could look like bumps in the road. They could look like, oh, this is really tough. But Jesus was passionate and patient. He operated in both, like this simultaneous moment of bringing those things together. Peter had passion too. Peter had lots of passion. I mean, he's been following Jesus. He's been absorbing and learning and growing. So it's not like a total loss, but he's missing some really important things. Of course, he was passionate. In Matthew chapter 16, he found his identity with Jesus. And later, he was a part of watching Jesus raise Lazarus from the dead. He was a part of all these miracles of power and hearing the heart of Jesus in all these different moments. And again, in Mark 13, he's like passionately saying, I won't deny you. I won't do this. And yet, Peter was not as patient in these scenarios. In this last evening, in the midst of all that he wanted to see happen, where he failed, ultimately boiled down to many things deep in his heart, I believe. But it emanated and was reflected in a loss of patience. Sometimes I think patience can be misunderstood. Sometimes I think people might look at patience as like, I just need to just sit still. I just need to just like check out. I need to like leave it alone. I'm going to ignore these things. Patience is not in any way missing an understanding. It's not like, oh, you were just aloof or you didn't see the problems. There's a lot of patience and strength that comes out of the awareness and seeing it, and then operating in what you know you're called to do. So in Mark 13, after the dinner, Jesus takes the disciples down to the Garden of Gethsemane, and he says, guys, would you please sleep with me? Or I'm sorry, would you please pray with me? And when the guys are supposed to be awake, they end up sleeping. And it's this interesting moment where why are they sleeping? Why did they fall asleep? It kind of gives you this perspective of how patience truly works. Patience is a very proactive piece of our lives. It's this passionate birthing of strength that to lean in when you're being pushed against, to stay focused when there's distractions, to remain true to who you are in the midst of anything that's trying to blow against you. That's what patience is. Patience can literally be translated as long suffering. It takes strength to suffer, to take on the bearings of other people or the other situations, things you couldn't even control maybe. And so in this moment in Mark chapter 13, when Jesus is praying and they fall asleep, he does come back to them. And I appreciate that Jesus doesn't just leave them and say, well, I guess they're just going to sleep. I guess that's not going to work out. I guess that, whatever. He keeps coming back to them. again and again, 3 times he comes back and he's like, hey guys, wake up. We still need to pray. Hey guys, wake up. We're still going to pray. Hey guys, please wake up. And I love that he doesn't give up, that he keeps leaning in, that patience can be still being faithful to holding people accountable. Accountability is always a part of this equation. It's not like, I'm just going to be patient, I'm going to let them keep failing, or I'm going to just miss it. No, as leaders, we can hold people accountable. We can bring correction in the midst of having a really great attitude of patience. And then, as this is all coming down, the other soldiers arrive. Judas is now arriving. Judas has given them the cue, and he says, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna give a kiss to Jesus. You'll know who Jesus is, and that's gonna be the guy you arrest." So Jesus is just waiting, and I can't imagine how hard it would have been for all the other disciples to sit there and watch while one of their friends is totally betraying their Savior in front of all these people, giving a kiss of all things, such a precious, like, affectionate thing in the midst of just turning everything upside down. That would have required a lot of hard patience, and Jesus stayed patient through that moment. Jesus didn't have to, like, push the guy over. Jesus just knew he was walking it out with passion and patience. And Peter, on the other hand, he didn't have that kind of patience. Peter, bless his heart, he got so scared, I think, and I think was so, like, frustrated and passionate and didn't feel like he could control all of the scenarios. So he whips out a sword and he goes, like, whacking at this guy, and with this sword somehow manages to only chop off an ear, which I think is noble, I guess, like, and it's actually a very interesting testimony. Like, when you lose patience, how do you only hit this part and nothing else? Like, it's a bad shot, and it's kind of confusing at how you could only hit that anyways. And Peter loses his patience, chops off the guy's ear, and Jesus still walks with patience. Jesus still moves forward, and Jesus he like walks alongside, puts his hand on the guy's ear, heals it immediately. Patience always brings healing. Patience always operates in a place of serving others. Patience is willing to carry forward in what is right, even when others around you are failing. And Jesus doesn't lose his cool. Jesus is super patient through that moment. I think it's interesting, though, when you think about Peter with his sword, how when you lose patience, you really do lose your accuracy. You really do lose your ability to just make the wise decisions. If you think of passion as like the fuel that pushes a vehicle forward on a road trip, I think you could say that patience in many ways is like a steering wheel. That peace and patience really is that thing that helps keep you on the road itself, because there will always be wind or other distractions, or maybe other vehicles or things that are going on that you can't control. And if you're not careful, you really need to keep your hands on that steering wheel. You have to keep straight so that you don't end up in a ditch. And it's so quick and so easy with a steering wheel, with just one turn, and you could be out off the road in just a quick second. And that's very similar to patience. You might feel like you are just tracking on the road, but if you don't guard your patience, you could just spin off into a different direction very easily. And I think that's a similar way that we can see the life of Peter, because he was passionate and gung-ho about Jesus. And then in these moments of losing his patience, probably feeling awful about falling asleep several times, losing his patience with himself perhaps, and then losing patience with those around him, losing patience with the situation that he doesn't feel like he understands. In the midst of all those things, even what maybe should have been stronger, he could have taken that sword and really done some damage, but he was so wobbly, I think because he lost his patience. He couldn't even function with a sword in his hand to do some real damage, to make some real effectiveness. And great for that guy's life, and great that Jesus was able to just come alongside and heal it as well. But when you look at Peter, you see this very interesting insight. When we lose our patience, we really risk hurting people. We risk damage. And that's something that we see in the episode as well. In episode 9, Rex is kind of spinning off in his heart and in his mind. He's worried about his business. He's worried about the getting to Gigi's fortune and all those things. And without his patience, he doesn't have passion for people anymore. Without his patience, he's worried about deadlines and things. He's more focused on things than he is on people. And it can tailspin into a place of hurt, into an atmosphere, an environment of hurt. And we see, just like we will see with Peter in the scriptures, how Peter walks through failures and walks through fear, but then still meets Jesus. We will see as well how even today, when we lose our patience, when we fail, when we have moments that are just out of our control and we don't know how to respond, even in those places, we can return to Jesus. We can refuel. We can get our hands back on the steering wheel. Jesus gives us, by his Spirit, he gives us this amazing power to bounce back, to get back on the bus, to refuel with him at any moment. When we talk about patience, we really do look at how that it's like that refueling, and it's an everyday thing with Jesus. That your time with Jesus, your quiet places, whether you're worshiping in that place, you're looking at the word, you're meditating on it, you're speaking it out, maybe you have declarations over your life, maybe you're writing and reviewing prophecies and dreams, whatever those quiet places, it's like those just gentle, like mountaintop places where no one can get to you, and the Lord fuels you in reminding you of who you are. He gives you a passion for people. He gives you a passion for all the things he's called you to. Those are refueling moments, and they position you to put your hand back on the steering wheel, to be patient, to steer forward, to keep straight, to keep on the road, on the path that he's got you on. And in those places, he sets you up to follow him well, to have passion in life, and to be able to walk out the calling that he has for you. I'm praying for you, whether you are watching this as a parent or as a leader or just watching it to dig in on the word. I so hope that God is igniting passion in your life. We are not called to be passive. We are not called to be passive. We are called to be passionate followers of Jesus. And when we follow Jesus, following Jesus is a lot of fun.